Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us for the John C. Thorns Memorial Series Lecture event tonight. We're thrilled to be co-hosting with NAMI on campus and with the Psychology Club from Fort Hays. I'm with the Center for Life Experience and More, the Executive Director. We're really looking forward to our panel of speakers. We think with the wealth of information and knowledge that they have, that they will be an excellent resource for anyone who's suffering from any kind of loss. I wanted to give you a little bit of information about the Center for Life Experience, and then the on-campus groups are going to give you information about theirs, and then we'll have an introduction from Margaret Schmidt, who is John C. Thorns' sister. So the Center for Life Experience hosts 3 different support groups. Each of them meets in the CFLA conference room at 6:30 p.m. The Healing After Loss group is for anyone who has experienced an adult loss. That meets the 3rd Tuesday of each month. Healing After Loss of Suicide is for anyone who has experienced a loss from suicide, and they meet the 1st and 3rd Wednesday of each month. Healing Hearts is for anyone who has experienced the loss of a child, and they meet the 2nd Tuesday of each month. If anybody has any kind of questions or is looking for any type of resources, you're welcome to call our office. You can find the phone number online. I don't know if anybody's going to write it down or needs it. It's 785-259-6859. And we are located at 103C East 27th Street here in Hays. It's the Oak Plaza Mall, right on 27th and Main Street. So first we're going to talk to Nevaeh and Tyler, and they're going to tell you about their on-campus groups.
I think it's on now. Hello everybody, thank you so much for coming tonight. My name is Tyler Weiss. I'm the Psychology Club President on campus, and we are so glad to have you here for this event. Psychology Club as an organization is just that. It is the club for psychology on campus. We help to push activities that not only enrich your experience as you stay here throughout your course of education, but also help to give you the skills and knowledge that you need going forward, both as students, as leaders, as future physicians. And my lovely advocate, Nevaeh, here as well, is the president of NAMI. I'll let her introduce herself this morning.
Yes, so as Tyler said, I'm president of NAMI, which is the National Alliance on Mental Illness. We are the affiliate on campus here at Fort Hays. I'm also part of Psychology Club, and we do a lot of things here because we're both housed in the psychology department. But with NAMI, our main focus is, of course, just on the advocacy, just providing support and providing education. Our big goal is to raise more public awareness, to address the stigma about mental health, because a lot of the time people, don't want to talk about the issues and struggles that they might be dealing with. And so what we really want to do is try to provide a safe space for people to do that and to feel supported enough in order to share maybe like things that they usually keep tucked away inside. And what we push is just compassion, connection, and then courage to do that. And by doing so, one of our big goals of this past year especially has been to do more outreach and reach out to just different people who maybe aren't aware of who we are and what we do. And so by doing that, we've done different walks for wellness to promote mental health, and then also physical health, just for your overall well-being. With Psychology Club, we have done mental health first aid training to provide those skills to see those signs when someone's struggling, how you can help them. And then this semester, we also have a lot of other cool events that we're working on, just different collaborations. So I'm happy to say that we're doing that. We're doing more outreach, we're connecting with people, and we really hope to continue to do so. And that's why we are so happy to be here now with all of you and talking about things that are really important and that need to be talked about. So thank you all so much for being here tonight, especially when it's so cold and it's slick out there. And so thank you all so much.
John C. Thorns Jr. is the man who inspired this lecture series. I am his sister Margaret Schmidt, and am very proud to be here tonight to tell a bit about John. John was a son, brother, husband, and father. In his professional life, he was an artist and teacher and mentor, so communication as well as passion to help others was very important to him. He was the oldest of 3 siblings, so as children being raised in a pastor's family, we became aware very early on the importance of communication in various life experiences that we encountered. As a teacher, professor of art, and then a Department of Art chair at FHSU, he became a mentor and friend to many students and faculty. His communication skill was very strong, which made him an excellent teacher. John was married in 1952 and then became a father of 2. In December of 1958, he became a widower and when his wife committed suicide from postpartum depression. This was the time period when suicide was not discussed and was shameful. He then was a single father of 2 little girls. Without the support of friends and family, this would not have been successful. John suffered another loss in 1983 when his youngest daughter was killed in an auto accident. Though through these life experiences of loss, John knew the need and value of sharing the experiences. When the opportunity arose to establish an organization to help people of our community that had suffered loss, he knew this was needed and would be a valuable asset to the Hayes area. The Center for Life Experiences was organized through a monetary gift of Gene Stauffer to the First Presbyterian Church for such an organization. John was an humble man, but was very proud of his work to establish CFLE. From the small mission project to a standalone organization that is supporting and helping people of our community and area. As John's sister, I am very proud and honored that his legacy of communication has been through his art, teaching, mentoring, and his involvement in CFLE, which is continuing to help the people of our community. Thank you.
A little bit about what I do, just to set the stage. I've been a hospice social worker for 30 years. And for those of you who don't know what hospice is, it is a Medicare program for people who have 6 months or less to live if they are no longer seeking any curative treatment for their illness. Most of the people that we take care of live in their own homes. Some of them live in a nursing home, some of them are in a hospital. Medicare regulations require a caregiver. Now, show of hands, how many of you have been a caregiver for somebody that was terminally ill? Thank you. That's amazing. For those of you who don't know, talk to these people. When somebody is diagnosed with a life expectancy of 6 months or less to live, it's not just that person, it's the entire family that is affected by that. And when you are going to go home and you're planning to die, you have to have somebody that's going to take care of you. And that person immediately starts grieving with you. Boy, this is really, Kate, I don't know, you're not in charge of audio, so this is going to be really, I don't know, hold it clear over here. Our caregivers are experiencing extreme loss every single day that they're taking care of somebody. They're losing who they were with that person. That relationship is no longer the same. Whether it's a spouse, whether it's your child, whether it's your parent. That doesn't exist anymore. If Gina was my sister and we grew up together, we had all our life experiences, and now Gina is going to die, who we are and how we relate to each other is no longer the same as it was. Suddenly, our caregivers are responsible for everything. They're going to be administering medications that they've never heard of. They're going to be taking people to the bathroom. They're going to wipe their loved one's backside. They're going to bathe them. They are going to stay up at night. They're going to wake up in the middle of the night and go check to see if somebody is still breathing. The stress that they feel about giving the wrong medicine at the wrong time and the wrong dose is unbelievable. They have lost sleep. They have lost their identity. They have lost their friends because nobody wants to come over and talk to somebody who is taking care of someone who is dying. Some of them do still work, and then their coworkers are trying to relate to them and they don't know what to say. If you go to work, you get a break from being a caregiver, but while you're at work, who's taking care of that person? And do I trust them? And are they going to do the things that I would do because they don't love that person the way I love them? A lot of stress that goes unnoticed. People don't understand it. They are suddenly an honorary nurse without going through all of the coursework. They don't have to take the exam, but they have to be there 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Everybody's grief is different. Caregivers are ignored a lot because they are so busy providing the care, and the person who is dying is going through their own losses, and we are trying to help them wrap things up in their life. How do I say goodbye to the people that are important to me? How do I finish unfinished business? Prior to hospice becoming involved, these people have been to doctors. They have had tests. Caregivers are waiting. What are the lab results? Are we going to do chemo? Is dialysis going to be an option? What if we have to put in a feeding tube? Who's going to be here? How am I going to take care of them at home? Who's going to help me? I don't have a babysitter. I don't know how to change the baby's diaper, but their mom is dying, so who's going to help me? Hospice comes in and we try to provide support and education to that person, but we don't stay. We're there, we walk out, we come back the next day, maybe 2 days. They can call if they need help, but in the meantime, it's all on you. And so that is a huge burden for our caregivers. We tell people that they need to take care of themselves. And how are you going to do that when you haven't slept for 3 days because you've been busy doing all of these cares? I try not to scare people when I tell them this, but when we meet families, we explain that if you are the caregiver, you cannot do this by yourself 24 hours a day. You have got to have help. We have experienced our caregivers of our patients die before the patient dies because they have been so incredibly stressed with the cares that they had to provide. They haven't slept, they don't eat right, but you're supposed to. Make sure you go get some exercise, make sure you eat right, make sure you get plenty of sleep, and none of that's going to happen. Our caregivers don't want to let go, they don't want to leave the house. And we say, but we have a volunteer that will come sit with your loved ones so you can take a break. And the caregiver says, I have this much time left with my mom, or my child, or my spouse. I'm not leaving. I am not missing a minute of this. But if you don't leave, maybe you die. And so how do we help support them? After that person dies, the caregiver is now lost. What do I do with my time? I've just spent weeks, maybe months, maybe years taking care of somebody. Who am I? I was a caregiver. Maybe I had to quit my job to take care of somebody. Now I've got to figure out who I am now, who do I relate to, who are my friends, because the friends that I have are no longer there. I have to find new friends and understand what I'm going through. As hard as the role was, sometimes people miss it. And in some instances, when we have couples who are taking care of a spouse, the statement is sometimes made of, I said I was going to do this for better or worse, in sickness and in health, till death do us part. So how do I not finish the job? How do I ask for somebody else to come in? We have people that start fighting with each other. I had somebody tell me once that I think she's trying to make me mad at her, so when I die, it won't hurt so much. It's like, it's going to hurt no matter what. It's okay to still be who you are. One gentleman told us that if any advice he had for caregivers, it was to be yourself and still treat that person just like you always treated them. Just because you're sick doesn't give you an excuse to be mean to other people. We're not going to walk around on eggshells. You're still going to have to be who you are because that's who you are familiar with. Sometimes people say, I really want my life back, but if I get my life back, they don't have theirs. Can you imagine how guilty you would feel? It's like, I just need you to die so I can get some sleep. I didn't mean it like that, but that's what I need. I really need sleep. And there is no going back. Because going back means that that person was healthy, and going back means you didn't have these illnesses and you didn't have to go to tests and hospitalizations. Going back is everything's fine, but then you have to do this again. Do you want to do that? No, I don't want to do that either. And so we kind of work with our caregivers as we go, like how can we help support you in that decision? How can we make you feel that it's okay to say, I really need some sleep and I don't want my mom to die, but I need her to die because I can't keep doing this. And we have people that say, I don't want to put my spouse in a nursing home, but if I don't put him in a nursing home, I am going to die because it's going to kill me. And so we're trying to be helpful. We're trying to support them. We give them suggestions. We give them recommendations. Ultimately, it's up to them. Just because somebody dies doesn't mean that the caregiver is sad. There are situations where when that person dies, the caregiver is so incredibly relieved because they had a bad relationship. Now I'm no longer going to be abused. Now I'm not going to worry about him being drunk. Now I'm not going to have to worry about him spending all of the money. Now I don't have to listen to him belittle me. And I keep saying him, I don't mean to point fingers. So we worry about how these caregivers are going to react, because if they aren't sad, everybody in the world is saying, I can't believe they're not sad. Well, you weren't walking in the shoes, so you don't get to decide. Everybody's grief is unique, and everybody's grief is the most horrible thing that they have ever experienced. And all the rest of us are experts on what you should be doing with your grief. I cannot tell you because I didn't have that relationship. I didn't endure what you endured. I'm not the one that lost the sleep. I'm not the one that had to walk you to the bathroom or find you on the floor because you didn't listen and you got up and I told you not to. That's your story. We need to support that story. In our society, men and women are not always looked at in the same way as far as grief. Men, we're getting a little bit better about saying it's okay to cry. Most men are not going to feel like they can cry because society says you gotta be a man, toughen up. So men typically won't express feelings like that. Sometimes their grief comes out with working. As the caregiver, they've worked and worked and worked, and now they don't have any work to do. Women tend to talk and talk and talk, and so they'll find somebody, they'll find a support group. As a caregiver, you gotta find somebody else that you can relate to. And what if there isn't a support group? Then what are you gonna do? What if it was an expected death versus an unexpected death? There's a lot of reasons that your grief is different. Maybe it's the first grief you've ever experienced, the first loss, and you don't have anything to relate it to. And the caregiver's like, I've never had anybody die. I don't know what this is like. I don't know what's expected of me. Our job is not to fix this. We had a patient who said to me, I really wish that people that came in from hospice would quit asking how my husband is doing. I'm the patient. Why do they keep asking how he's doing? And I said, we're going to be able to help you with your pain. And we're going to be able to help you with your breathing. And if you have anxiety, there's medications. We do not have anything that is going to make this not hurt for him. There is no medicine available. Well, here, if you take 2 of these every 6 hours, somebody's going to keep track of it for you. you're going to be okay. The reason we're concerned about that caregiver is because that caregiver is completely and utterly responsible for your well-being. And we need them to function, because if they can't survive this, then we're in big trouble. We got to figure out what to do with them. We in hospice appreciate our caregivers, and it's not just family that is a caregiver, biological family. Families for whom it matters. It's your hairdresser, it's your mechanic, it's your co-workers. Anybody that's important to you is who we consider your family. And sometimes our caregivers are the nursing home staff that have taken care of this person for the last 10 years, and they love them. And maybe they're the only family that that nursing home resident has, and now we're coming in to help take care of them. And so our job is to help support those caregivers. Because in nursing homes, they experience a lot of deaths over and over and over. And these caregivers, these people that come in to take care of them, they're here every day. I'm still going to give you your medicine. I'm still going to give you a bath. I'm going to help you eat your breakfast. And then you're going to die. And they need to talk to somebody too. So we try to be available to those people as well. Every death is sad, but they don't have to be bad, because we can help manage some symptoms. We can try to help people have support. We can try to teach them what they're going to be experiencing as it comes along. We know what the signs and symptoms are of impending death. Help the caregiver. But how do we say goodbye? How do we let go? Because they don't want to let go. And this is it. And so what we try to explain to our caregivers is, in the home situation, this is the last, best gift that they're going to give that person, is to be able to be at home, surrounded by the love of their family, and we are going to give them education and support, hold their hand, and walk them through the process. Kate handed a little brochure out to everybody. If you have questions about hospice, if you want information, if you belong to 15 different organizations and you need somebody to come do a talk about hospice, we would be happy to do that for free. Hospice uses volunteers. It's a Medicare requirement. And some of our hospice volunteers are here tonight. I'm not going to name names to embarrass anybody. But we do need hospice volunteers. We're going to have another training, I believe, in March. And so if you're interested in trying to be one of those people who would give some relief to a caregiver, we would be happy to train you and have you part of our wonderful hospice too.
So I have been a caregiver for my dad, who passed away September 17th of 2022. And there have been several times when I called up on a late afternoon. I called up Myrna and I said, I really need your help. I need a guest speaker for my death and dying class, and I have to take my dad to a medical appointment or fill in the blank appointment. And Myrna said, sure, what can I do for you? Even if she'd already spoken to me, or spoken for my students. Myrna has done that. And this one right here, Chris Munch, who will be speaking next, has also done me the same favor. Okay, now you can sit down. Yeah. So I owe these two big time. I think I called Myrna a couple times more often than I called Chris, but both of them have done me tremendous favors in speaking to my classes on absolutely short notice, and so I am grateful. I want to follow up with what Myrna said about caregivers and that can other persons other than just family that can take those different positions. My hairdresser, I would take my sweet Pop. I adored my dad. I would take him with me to I'd get my hair done. So would Pop. And granted, his was crew cut, just a smidge longer than Chris's. Anyway, but my hairdresser, Dad, Pop was in a wheelchair, and we could roll him right into the hairdressers. Whenever my fix-it guy would show up at the house to do something, he would come and sit in a chair and visit with my dad and fill in the news, kind of guy stuff, and football, in which I know nothing. But this, I mean, I told my sister I was far more social when my dad lived in the house with me than before, because I wanted people in there to visit with him. Somebody be over at the house, and I would be, oh, come in and say hi to my pop. And it tickled me one day. The neighbor walked in the house before I did when I got home from work, and Pop yelled out really loud, "Hey, sweetie pie!" And my neighbor said, "Well, hi." And anyway, it absolutely takes a group of caregivers. But it is certainly hardest on the primary caregiver and that toll that it takes. I distinctly remember that period of time. I am now done of about 7.5 years of parental caregiving. When I took care of my mother, my folks lived at that time 10 hours one way, about an hour northwest of Memphis. So it was teach 3 classes on Thursday, drive overnight, get mother to doctor appointments on Friday. And then Pop moved here after mother passed, which made things significantly easier. And speaking of arguments, my pop and I only had one argument. 2.5 years he lived with me, and we had exactly one argument, but it was a doozy. I thought we might need couples counseling. It was about the air conditioning. The air conditioner vent was right above his lift chair. And he's like, "Well, I'm freezing in here." And I'm like, "Well, it's stifling, back in the rest of the house." And anyway, well, golly, you can adjust those vents. And so we took care of that. But for a little while there, it was touch and go. And so, and grief. I did a lot. My pop declined quickly, I would cry myself to the hospital, and I would cry myself back home from the hospital. I distinctly remember exactly, still emotional, how bad that felt. We loved to watch BattleBots together. We could cheer for ruination and destruction, and nothing bled. In fact, those engineers seemed to enjoy putting those machines back together again. We had always done so many things together. And so that grief and sadness that I felt, I distinctly recall, I know that feeling. Some days it's still there. Which gets me to the lies that society tells us about grief. Which a big one that I hear, and I have heard this from guest speakers to my Death and Die class. I hear this from individuals in the Healing After Loss group. On occasion, the first day of class, actually, I have students write on index cards their experiences with death and their kind of comments or questions about death. And it's not infrequent that someone writes on the card, "Well, the kid will say, well, I told someone, my cousin died or my grandparent died," and the person said, "Oh, aren't you over that yet?"
Yeah.
No, you're not over that yet. And you're never going to be over this.
Yeah.
And I describe it to my students as developing coping muscle. That society, maybe because the person who makes this comment is ignorant, maybe they just don't know. Maybe they haven't had a loss like yours yet. Maybe there's someone who's just flat stupid. Not every so often, it's not an infrequent experience. Or maybe the person was just careless. But for whatever reason, we know the truth. You're not going to be over this. Your life is inevitably and unalterably changed. But you have to develop your coping muscle. You have to get through this. Whether you take on meditation, whether you get a new social group such as a grief support group, whether you start journaling, whether you make connections with different family members. In my feelings of grief about my mother spoke so much about her family back in Central Illinois. I have very intentionally gotten in contact with several of Mother's cousins. They're now like second cousins to me. And so when I go back and put flowers on my folks' graves, I have lunch with these cousins, and they know all these family stories about people that my mother, would tell me about when I was a little kid. And now, oh my gosh, here's a picture. Here's a picture of cousin Ida. Except nobody called her cousin Ida. They call her Aunt Pudge, because everybody in Mother's family had to have a nickname, which makes the whole genealogy family tree thing very confusing. But because she was so much older than nieces and nephews, you needed to call her Aunt as a sign of respect. And he had pictures. I only had one. Oh, we had all kinds of pictures now of Aunt Pudge. And so anyway, that's a way that I have tried to connect with that. In experiencing grief, one of society's lies to us is, oh, there's a work-life balance. Oh yeah, you can just balance all this out, it'll all be okay. And we know, I think, that is a great big lie. There is no work-life balance. Anybody who has raised children or been a caregiver or had some big work project and also trying to meet up with children's events, nieces and nephews events at school, there is no balance. And as you're doing caregiving, you're at work and you're thinking about those test results. You're at the hospital and you're thinking about the work that's expected of you the next day in class. 4 different semesters, I entered final grades from Hayes Med. From ICU, I've been so grateful they had a good Wi-Fi system. But one of society's lies is, oh, there's this work-life balance, and oh, you can do it. Well, that's a lie. And then, of course, there is the issue about, oh, maybe you're just lazy. Oh, maybe you're just lazy. In fact, I think you probably might have seen in the news this last week, the CEO of Wayfair told his employees that, oh, work-life balance, and you should be working at least 80 hours a week, and no one ever got anywhere, if I get a letter from him later, anyway. So, no one ever got anywhere by laziness and just put it all out there. And again, this is another one of those, of course he wants his employees to work themselves to death for his own CEO perks, for his own business's profits. But the society lie that we get is oh, you're so lazy. You can't do 80 hours of work and be a parent and be a caregiver. Oh, you're just lazy. There are all of these different lies that society tells us as we're grieving, and one of those deals with suicide. So, in the cards, those index cards that I mentioned, that I have my death and dying students fill out the first day of every class, and then we do this again in about 6 weeks after classes start. I ask them about, their experiences with death, and I have been saddened. I have been surprised that the number of students who are in this class who have lost people close to them, family members and friends, because of suicide. And over, you read these articles out there saying, oh, there are these signs. There are always signs prior to a suicide. And one of society's lies is that, oh, if you had just seen the signs, if you had just seen these signs, oh, you could have saved this person. And I do have a couple articles in my class materials about potential signs. And then I have a Harvard Medical Journal article that often there aren't signs. There just aren't signs, that this is often a spontaneous action. There weren't warning signs. You couldn't have done anything. And I impress upon my students, and I want to impress upon you, that if you know someone who committed suicide, and you are going around with this terrible weight on your shoulders of, well, if I could have just done something. I was too self-centered, I was too busy, I was too self-interested, oh, I was too selfish a person, if I'd just done something more. If you're going around with this terrible sense of guilt on your shoulders, folks, don't. This is not your weight to bear. It is not. And I will tell you something else. That person, and honoring the memory of this person you love so much, you know that they would want you to be happy. You know that they loved you, they were your friend, they valued you, your relationship, and never, ever would they want you to have that guilt, to have that sadness, to have that weight on your shoulders all the time. And so I see these articles about warning signs, and Tony Dungy, sports folks, who is Tony Dungy?
Former coach.
Yeah,
For the football fans, right?
yeah. And he also had a son who died of suicide. And one of the, I think, most important things he does, other than announce, for football, he goes around and participates in different conferences about suicide. There were no warning signs. He had almost the stereotypical nuclear family, close-knit, doing the suppers together, finding out what the kids were doing in school sort of thing. And his son just took his life. There were no warning signs. And so of society's lies that they tell us, like, oh, we need to buy all this stuff to be happy, and we all need to be size 0s, or at least, at the most, a size 4 to have a valuable life. One of the worst lies they tell us is, oh, if you had just seen these signs. Well, folks, often there just aren't any. And honor that person's life by being happy, by valuing the time you had with them. Often students ask about losses, what can I do? What can I do to deal with grief? And I do suggest journaling. I suggest getting in network groups, sociability. I suggest getting pets. I am like the cheerleader. Boy, if you want total acceptance, unconditional love, go get yourself a pet. I have never once had a pet say, hey girl, you shouldn't be wearing those pants. No, I've never once. And sometimes they pee on the floor. They're so happy to see me. My 9-month-old puppy, every time June sees me, she pees on the floor, and I'm like, oh, hi, June. And those things, do you want to pay it forward? Do you want to get yourself involved to make other people's existences better?
I wish I wasn't here tonight. I wish I could go back to December 23rd of 2005 before my son died and be that rock skipper, right? Never deep diving. I just was never before. It's always an honor to come be at something like this. I've spoke all over the country, and I've always wished that it wasn't me, right? To kind of have that burden, to carry that with me. Tonight, hearing everybody talk makes me relive my son's death, because it's grief is real. It's just as real today as it was 18 years ago. One of the things that I absolutely love about coming to Kate's class and speaking is I can be brutally honest in that room. And when I say brutally honest, nothing to hide, right? I have something to hide at home because I don't want my wife to carry some of my loss. Sometimes that's hurt for her, or she hurts for me, so I hold some of that back. But when I get to go to that classroom, I get to dump it into that room. Because I have absolutely nothing to lose, right? I don't know if I would have been your age, if somebody would have came and talked to me, if I would have listened. Probably not. Because I would have been the guy that would have said, it's not going to happen. I've lost my son, I've lost my dad. I watched my sister-in-law gasp in hospice to the very end. I told my wife a couple days before she died because I knew better. I cannot be here anymore. I did not want to be in the room when she died because of her parents. I did not want to relive and watch them go through the grief that I experienced on December 23rd. It is just too close to my loss. And I don't know that I always knew that, right? I know now that I can be that. I can be that person. I can be what I am. I can be the dude wearing blue jeans with foam on the pants and my dirty sweatshirt, right? I've got 2 different socks on right now. And I wear 2 different socks because I'm just a beginner. Every morning when I get up, I put on 2 different socks. It's a reminder to me that I'm just a beginner every morning, right? If I'm 60 and I can wake up today and start my day knowing that I have 60 years of experience to approach my day. When Kate messaged me yesterday, I think, and asked me to come and speak to the class, I was going, shit. All at the same time. Because I want to go, but I also know it's going to be hard, right? Because of the brutal honesty that I get to dump into that room. It is my therapy. It's what I love doing because it helps me allow my son to stay alive. But it is not my goal. It is not my goal to keep him alive through that, but it's my goal to keep me alive through that, right? So I'm a woodshop teacher, right? I grew up in a woodshop, and I taught construction management here at Fort Hays for 10 years, and then I taught with Randy, and I needed to do something different. It's just how I am. But I brought my pickup sticks tonight because these pickup sticks have been on floors all over the country: Dallas, Miami, Florida, New York City. I've hauled these sticks everywhere with me. And the reason I haul these sticks with me is because this is what I believe. This is what I believe. Talk about sayings. You ever heard I've been in your shoes? I've been in your shoes. You've never been in my shoes, right? If you and I were to go to the Grand Canyon and stand there and look at the Grand Canyon together, we would both have a different perspective. And we would both have a different perspective because what's brought us to that moment, right? So I use pickup sticks and a Rubik's Cube and all other kinds of things. And the reason I do that is because of this. If I teach you, or if I tell you how to run a table saw, how successful do you think you'd be? If I had a table saw, and I showed you, and I set the blade to the 4-inch safety margin so your hand was right by that blade when you cut that board, you'd remember it, right? Because of the experience you have. That's why grief is so real, right? I go back to the phone call. I go back and I can hear my ex-wife crying in the background. They didn't even need to tell me that my son had died. I could hear the bell. I knew something horrible had happened. So I use pickup sticks, right? And what pickup sticks is this, have you ever seen you draw a timeline, right? So we draw a line with an arrow, and it's full of lines. And each one of those lines is a stick, okay? I was born, Claudia, which matter of fact, I just saw her last week, a gal from 7th grade. I saw a gal, her name's Claudia. I saw her for the first time in quite a few years. And ran into her, and the first thing out of her mouth was, you remember in 7th grade we held hands going over to the high school to the Christmas movie? And I go, I'll never forget it. I'll never forget it. And she brought that up, right? A life experience. I can remember, as soon as she said it, I could remember us 7th graders walking across. And I can remember it. I can remember that. I can remember when they opened the window, when I had to take summer school because I wasn't doing good in math. And my mom made me take summer school. And the best thing that teacher ever did was open that window because I could hear the kids in the neighborhood playing, and I could hear the lawnmower, and and I could smell the grass. Do you smell the grass? You can smell the grass, right? I can remember when my brother bullied my little brother. My older brother bullied my little brother until I stood in the stairway and I said, no more. If you're going to bully him, you're going to bully me first. And I stood up for my brother. And he said, oh yeah? What are you going to do about it? And I said, I don't know what I'm going to do. So I ran to the backyard because I did not want to fight him. But he pushed me. So I took his ass down. I pinned him to the ground, and I said to my little brother, go get the Tabasco sauce. We still don't have a relationship today. That's a true story. But I stood up to my brother. Sometimes your family can be your own worst enemy. I can remember the death of my son. And when you take all of these life experiences, right, and you stack them together, it's who you are. Right? You are who you are. You can tell your stories. 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 That's who you are, and you all have your own sticks. Until tragedy strikes. And those life experiences and everything you've brought together in your life becomes scattered, hopeless, lost. Right? After my second divorce started to happen, I remember going to Walmart. My second wife was having an affair. I discovered it. I could not believe this was happening a second time, right? For better or for worse, married one time. I'm going to go through my second divorce after my son died. And I remember getting in a cul-de-sac in Kansas City, in a roundabout. And I went around and around and around that roundabout because I could not decide which road to take. I remember getting to Walmart, needing to buy new dishes, and I didn't know whether to buy the red ones or the blue ones or the paper plates. I didn't even know if I wanted plates because I was contemplating suicide. Because now my son was dead, I'm going to go through my second divorce. Do I want to live the rest of my life with that? Broken, lost. I was walking out of church following my son's casket, and the guy steps out of the aisle and he goes, be strong, Chris. He didn't know. But in that moment, I should have had the courage to be the weakest person I could be. But you said, guys aren't supposed to cry. Right? Guys aren't supposed to show weakness. So here's what I did. I gathered all my sticks back up. I remember walking out of that church and being as strong as I could for everybody else. Because that's what I needed to do. Right? So I gathered up the sticks that I could, and I moved forward. Why in the hell is our cemetery in the middle of town? For years, I would drive by the cemetery and I'd see my son's grave, and if I didn't say good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, I'd go around the block and I'd say it. Because I'd been doing it for 16 years. And I had to figure out a different way to love it. Right? When he spilled his cereal, I carried that regret because I got mad at him. He said, Dad, I'm just making my cereal like you do. Right? When he crashed his bike into the stickers, and I said, oh, come on, get up. And his hands were covered in stickers. I said, come on, get back on that bike. I regretted that. So every time I go by the cemetery, if I didn't look over and say good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, I'd go back around the block and tell them. What am I supposed to do when I go there? Am I supposed to stand there? Am I supposed to kneel there? Am I supposed to talk to him? The only picture in my house of my son is the one my wife put up with him. I don't need his pictures up. I don't need it. few weeks ago, my golden retriever Moose died. Whole another form of loss. I had to take him to the vet and put him down. All I could think about was Blaine. It like sucked me right back. She mentioned the puppy because I have a 9-week-old golden retriever now at home who is lively and ready to go and pooping on the floor, and I could care less. The patience that Moose taught me, the patience. Patience. To look at you differently. Like, to meet you where you are. That's what Blake taught me. That's what Moose taught me. That's what my dad taught me. To be okay where I am. My only regret is that it took me all these years to get it. To be so honest with myself. When my help is late at work, I'm not mad because they're late because they're costing me money. I'm mad because they get one chance at life to be on time and to be the best at what they do, right? To work hard, to get up early, to make a difference, to wear 2 different socks. Don't wait to lose something to gain something, right? You shouldn't have to do that. It's good to be alive. It's good to be alive. I'll end with this. So, after my second divorce happened, I remember late in life.
Okay. I'll keep it together.
I remember I was teaching at the Bonner Springs High School, and my students could tell how disconnected I was from being there in the moment. They asked me, man, those students asked me a lot of tough questions. Those young high school kids, those freshmen, you ever think of Blake in his grade? You ever do this, you ever do that? They ask me questions that adults would never ask us, right? They're afraid to ask. But they would ask me those tough questions. And I remember one of the gals saying, one of the girls in my class saying, Mr. Munch, if you could do anything, what would you do? You know? If I could do anything I wanted to do, I'd get rid of everything for a chance for something. So the next day I turned in my resignation from teaching at the end of the year from Bonner Springs High School. And I drove 33,000 miles. I spent 9 months on the road living in my car. Disconnected from Be Strong. Disconnected from he's in a better place. No, he's not. I'm a selfish dad. Right? I stay disconnected from cable TV. I stay disconnected from all of those things, and you know what I did? I sat in a state park in Texas and stuck a revolver in my mouth. Tasted the cold steel. I was ready to blow my brains out the back of my head in that car. But all I could think about was my son saying, seriously, Dad? Seriously? You mean to tell me for 16 years you were up my butt, making me get up early, be there on time, and fight? And this is what you're going to do? And that's what I did. Threw the gun in the lake, and I kept on driving. Kept on driving, looking for answers, looking for the best way to live, the best way to support. Not afraid to not care about it. Let people see me grow. Let people see me sad. Let people see me cry. Let people see me be miserable. Let people see me fall apart. I was just in my bank, talking to my banker 6 weeks ago, crying. I don't know if I can do this. The challenge of my business and building it, I didn't know if I could do it. He's like, Mudge, look at your damn socks. All right? To be that honest with yourself. To be that honest with yourself. To be that comfortable with yourself. That's what it's all about. The hardest thing you'll ever do, the hardest thing you will ever do is not be you, but be you when other people push back.
I have a suggestion to make. We have heard 3 exceptionally powerful perspectives here so far this evening. And I don't have an intention of following that in a, certainly not a competitive way, but maybe in some way to join it. I think I would like to offer this to you and suggest this. Now that is, you don't have to do this, but here's just an idea I have. There are blessings, there are gifts. There are hurdles that are coming out of what we just heard. And I think it's important that we acknowledge those. That's just my thought. And you're welcome to join me in this if you'd like to. Here's what I want to suggest. Just sit up straight in your chair. There we are. And if you choose to close your eyes, please do that. You might want to know who's sitting next to you and assume that their hands won't wind up in your pocket while your eyes are closed. But as you're here, it's a trusting environment. It's a good place. And so I'd like to suggest that you take about 2 or 3 deep breaths in through your nose. I can count you through that. Let's go to a count of 3. In deep breath in through the nose. In, 1, 2, 3. Hold it in your lungs. 1, 2, 3. Blow it out slowly. 1, 2, 3. Just sit there for a moment. Another breath in slowly. 1, 2, 3. Hold it. 1, 2, 3. Gently out. Blow it out. 1, 2, 3. And the last one, do on your own rhythm. Ready? In. Hold it. Out. Breathe normally. And with your eyes still closed. Lightly, gently, easily. Reflect on, notice, or let it come to you. 1 or 2 pearls or 3 gifts that you just received from these first 3 folks and what they said and what they shared. It could be a picture, it could be a word, an image, a feeling. Doesn't even have to be a happy feeling. It's good that it is. And somewhere in your awareness, hold a sense of gratitude for that gift you received. Inwardly, just say thank you. And then when you're ready, open your eyes. Well, my belief is that we're a unique group. We're not here just as a thrown together haphazard group of strangers. I don't know that there's a giant hand that said you need to be here. Everybody made an effort, made an attempt to get here this evening. Here we are. And we're gathered together. On this particular occasion, we could do this again tomorrow night, a whole different group, a whole different consciousness, a whole different outcome. This is unique. This is wonderful. This is the present. Yesterday afternoon, a young man came into my office. He's been a student here for the past couple of years. He was diagnosed, and he tells people about this, he was diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder. Social life has been a challenge for him. Over the course of a few years, he recalls time periods when he was growing up, elementary school in his hometown, picked on terribly. Became very introverted. How I met him was in class, in neuropsychology class, and he began to become more interested in how the brain works. Well, so am I, and so are many of you. And his interest in how the brain works was focused on his particular predicament, his situation. Why does my brain create the conditions that I have? How did that happen? Was I born this way? Has somebody done something about it? Did I inherit something? He has worked hard over the last couple of years to become a good student here at the university and has finally graduated. Spent some extra time on the campus, not as a student, but still enjoying the college life because he wasn't sure what step he wanted to take next, where he wanted to go next. So we had this conversation. He told me his plans. And through some of them, he admitted feeling like a failure. And through some of the other plans he described, he said, I think there's a sense of adventure here. Isn't that weird? How can I feel both of these things at the same time? Because you're a human being. And human beings feel a whole bunch of inconsistent things, confusing things, contradictory things all at the same time. And I don't think it's much different when we're talking about loss and grief. And change is that we feel so many things all at the same time. And it's hard to sort that out. It's very confusing. It's troubling. And it is especially so when that loss is the result of someone's death. Because I think, as a psychologist, my witnessing someone else's death reminds me of the inevitability of my own. By God, I don't know if I'm ready for that. Some days I think I probably am. There's a whole bunch of days I say, as long as I can stave that baby off into the distant, dim, dark future, I'm for it, and I'll do everything I can to avoid it. But I know back in the back of my mind something's happening sooner or later. I had a fellow that I was visiting with a couple of weeks ago. So I'm a psychologist, psychotherapist, and I still occasionally have the opportunity to visit with people at a psychotherapeutic level. I had a gentleman in just a few weeks ago who was talking about raising, in his terms, raising his older parents. He's a man in his 50s, his parents are in their late 80s. And he said, I love them dearly, I go visit them routinely, and I know they're going to go one of these days, and I'm just not ready for it. I don't know how to get ready for it. Do I have to? When's that going to happen? Because I know what I'm going to go through. I know I'm going to hurt. I know I'm going to change. I know life will be forever different for me. As Chris was demonstrating to us, I'm not sure how I'm going to reconstruct it, or whether these things are going to matter anymore, and how these pieces are going to fit back, and what part of me is doing all of this. He says, as As a psychologist, I've always loved to have the opportunity, I thought, to be able to provide perspective and answers for people, or at least openings so that they could kind of discover their own answers if that was available to them, if they take advantage of that. Just about as often as I feel like I succeed, I also felt like I failed and wasn't able to open any doors for people. Until I finally kind of realized that the door opening process wasn't my responsibility. It was theirs. I had to even remind some people that there were those doors and that they could be open, that they should have the courage to take a look at it. Now, we're all happy about change when it's going to go in our direction. We think there's some real advantage to it. We have a whole different set of thoughts when we're looking at change as a foreboding thing. I'm going to lose something. I won't be the same on the other side. I like where I am at. I don't want to go to this next piece. I like the people in my life, the things in my life. I'm not in this for loss. I'm in this for gain. This is what life is about. And it's that part of us, it's that part of our brain that's very active. It's our survival instinct. It's our survival part of our brain. In fact, it's probably the primary function of each of the cantaloupe that you and I have on top of this spine of ours, is to keep us alive. That's its goal. And one of the greatest threats to our survival is loss, and the brain records that. In fact, the brain is looking out for loss and looking out for change. It's looking out for any kind of threat to survival. So it interprets loss as a threat to its survival. And one of the ways that it signals that threat is through a fear response. So it's almost natural that we all fear death. It's kind of the ultimate loss. We fear change. We fear dramatic change. I do. I was raised in a family of 6, my nuclear family of 6 people, my parents, 2 older brothers, my younger sisters, a close family. My mother was consistent in reminding us that we were a close-knit family. When we were fighting, she said, "You can't fight, we're a close-knit family." We turned it out. And I bought it. We were a close-knit family. My brothers and I, very bright people. One an attorney, the other a teacher, family. My sister, well-accomplished nurse. So from an academic standpoint, and professional standpoint, we did our jobs. My father worked 3 jobs to get us to that point. He was a flour mill worker for the longest time, and later a bookkeeper, and he felt very good when he was one day promoted to be a bank teller. My mother graduated from the 8th grade, and that's when her education stopped, her formal education. It was a very bright moment. But she hadn't stopped in the 8th grade. She was one of 13 siblings. She had 7 siblings younger than her. Their mother and 2 of their sisters in the course of a week died, ptomaine poisoning in 1933. Botulism, a couple of sisters. In the course of 2 weeks, my mother's life totally changed. She went from schoolgirl in the 8th grade, doing what 8th grade girls look for, boyfriends, bright futures and such like that, to her father coming to her 2 weeks after the funeral and say, "I'm sorry, you can't go on to high school. You never stay home, you need to take care of your 5 younger siblings." Her life changed immediately. She said, "I cried for 3 months, but I couldn't go to school." Loss. Hence my mother's mantra, "We are a close-knit family." We become close-knit. That's my legacy. That's what I'm going to carry out with you also. We were a close-knit family. We were no strangers to adversity. We were no strangers to death. She reminded us of what life is like and how it can be hard, but that there's always a doorway, and you are the only one that can open it. You must have faith and believe in that doorway will be open to you. You put your hand on the knob and turn it. You can't be afraid to do that. Loss is part of the risk, and by gosh, go take it. Because there's something on the other side. And you won't know what it is until you step through it. You know? So I'm the only one left My brothers and I had this pact with one another and my sister. We were going to grow old together. My two older brothers both died. My sister and my brother, oldest brother and my sister both died in the same week. One on early Christmas morning, and the other on New Year's Day. And he had come to California to participate in her funeral. Had a heart attack. And by noon that day, he was out of the body permanently. Two of them gone. I'll never forget coming back to my sister's home as I prepared to officiate her funeral that afternoon. My mother was sitting there with my remaining brother, who was kneeling on the floor in front of her, his head in her lap, crying. And I walked in the door second, and she looked at me and said, "Is it true? Is he gone, my older brother?" And I said, "No, I'm afraid so. He is." More wailing. I'll never forget the sound of that cry, because I identifies what that feels like. Oh, and by the way, there's a brain basis for that stuff. But just to say there's a brain basis for it doesn't explain the depth of that experience and how that level of sorrow can vibrate through us. And we looked at one another with this sense of, now what? In 4 years, we've gone from a family of 6 to now a family of 3, and the 3 of us weren't sure how to relate to one another with this. Look at all those sticks scattered all over the place. How are we going to pick those things back up? Haven't made sense. Within 5 years from that time, I was finally orphaned. At 60 plus years of age, I was an orphan. Each one of those passings, and by the way, I'm the one, I'm telling my brothers if they're listening, I kept my end of the bargain to grow old with you guys so far. Grief, form of bereavement I've written here. I kept notes to myself so I would ramble all over the place, wind up in the tall weeds and not sure how to get back on the main road. Has emotional effects, physical effects, psychological effects, physiological effects. I say physical effects. Neurological effects. It changes us permanently. We're never the same. I have noticed with the loss of my family, my 5 other family members, that each one of them is different. I was present for all of them except for one. Each of them passed in a very different way. I reached up and closed the eyes of my father, my oldest brother. I touched my sister in the most loving spot I could, what I believe is what I call her spiritual eye, the place of sacred residence. I touched that for her. I laid my head on my shoulder, on my dad's shoulder rather, as he expired and took his last breaths, and then closed his eyes. Each one of those experiences were different. Did something different to me. None of them were super joyful. I felt tremendous sorrow. I didn't know how to bear some of the experience that I was having. I didn't know where they'd gone. I couldn't find them. I attached to people at an inner level. I had dreams with them. I have inner conversations with them. I don't walk the street having those conversations. I don't want anything to think anything unusual of me as a psychologist. Walking down the street visiting with invisible entities. But I have conversations with my friends. I write them love notes in my thoughts. I try to make those kind of contacts with them when I see them. And I am genuinely happy to see my friends. I see a number of my friends, students here with me this evening. I love them all. I was looking for my mom in the weeks after she left. I had a client, a young lady, come to me at one point. She had lost her husband. She was 31 years old. They were married for 7 years. He had a very sudden heart attack. He was 32. Who knew? He was a good guy. He had a heart attack. Died. Very unusual circumstance. She came in for grief counseling, we called it at the time. After 5, 6, 7 sessions, somewhere in that neighborhood, she came in one time and she said, "I'm so sad, I cannot get out of this funk. My mother told me that if I was just patient enough, I would see him in a dream. I would dream about him." And she said, "I've been trying and I can't dream about him. I ain't finding him. What am I doing wrong?" Well, I assured her she wasn't doing anything wrong whatsoever, that it was a strong connection, and the fact that you weren't finding him in your dream isn't necessarily some proof positive that you didn't have a strong connection to begin with, you know. And I hope she bought that. But I wanted to soothe her. I wanted her to be able to forgive herself. It was easier for me to say that to her than it was for me years later when I couldn't find my mother inwardly, because I wanted to talk with her. Yeah, I wanted to tell her that I was still okay. And to thank her for the things that she did, the love that she gave me, the person I was, and are you still proud of me that? I couldn't find her. She went anywhere. And she told me she would be. She had lung cancer, stood in the kitchen sink in her house one morning, oxygen tank on, oxygen out of her nose, looked up, she's still not afraid of dying, just not ready to go yet. Not ready to go, I'm still curious. I still want to know stuff, you know. It's a life lesson. Stay curious. Keep wondering. Keep open. I got up one morning, dressing, put my clothes on, looking in the mirror, with that same kind of empty lament, Mom. Tried it again, good find you last night. I have no idea what's happening. Maybe I'm just not getting myself in the right frame of mind. Maybe you're off doing stuff with your sisters. You had a lot of them. There was a bunch of times where you connected with them. And I know you're all over the other side doing this stuff. But where, you know, I'm still here. Just come see me one of these days. I'm not sitting there gritching one thing or another. Look in the mirror and suddenly, something transforms. And now I have my glasses on too. Without my glasses, this is a challenge to see how many fingers I've got. So I'm standing in front of the mirror, not seeing very clearly. Something starts to take place. I start to get a little bit of a sense of double vision, and it forms. And I begin to see the features of my mom in my face. Her rounded face, her chin, her smile, her eyes. That's it. She can go anywhere. She's here. She's here. Now, as my brain playing some tricks on me, I wanted to know. Yes and no. So how can I have this level of depth of feeling about these things and these absolute certainties about the experiences and know that the veil between me here and my loved one there is thin? And that I can reach out and touch them, and that I can do that when my inhibitions are lowered, when I'm sleeping, when I'm not really thinking about it, or when I see something that reminds me of them. I keep my father's favorite blues thin tie draped over the bedpost. It's back, the only relic of his that I've got is that it reminds me of him. And the things that I used to keep his high school classroom, I don't know where that's anymore. And eventually, this is one of the things we do as a mourning process, is we keep artifacts. We keep them close to us. And we have to, because that's as close as we can get to the reality of the person that was with us at one time. You know, I hadn't heard my dad's voice at one point for 12 years, 13 years, and I heard it on a recording, and tears came to my eyes. And it brought back all these memories. What's that about? What's going on there? Some of you may have had similar kinds of experiences. I had a gentleman in therapy at one point who was, nobody had died in his life, but he might as well have. His wife divorced him. He wasn't in favor of the divorce, but he felt like he couldn't do anything about it. Several months after the divorce, feeling very lonely, he comes in, so I'm not sleeping much at night, just not sleeping well at all. Talking about room hygiene, room temperature good, but what kind of night clothes are you wearing, how much coffee you drink later part of the day. Are you still looking into your cell phone and getting all that blue light and keeping your particular part of your brain that keeps for light? Is that, keeps you awake and so on? He said, yeah, I'm not doing any of that stuff. He says, I am sleeping on the couch. He said, that gives me a sense of comfort. He said, that's an interesting thing. I roll up against the couch, especially on the back. I put my back against the couch, and that's about the only thing that soothes me. He said, why is that? I said, I don't know. Why don't you tell me what it is? He said, it's kind of a secure thing. And then he stopped, and he started weeping, and he said, in the days when our marriage was good, we used to sleep together. And he'd call it reverse spoon. She would lie up against him, against his back. He missed that. She was gone. But the brain didn't realize that. The brain said, you know what? Your body still has a need to have a body up against you, and you got to find a way to compensate for that. And the best he could do was lay on the couch with his back against it. He felt comforted by doing that. It was a sense of loss that he was feeling. It gave us an opportunity to process that. I had another young man who was able to convince me of how we carry these sensations. Let me back this up a little bit. So what the brain does. Think about the brain as a survival mechanism. It is always reaching out. It is always trying to make sense of the world around us. I'm fond of saying one of the things that the brain sitting up here does is ask two questions. What's going on and what do I do about it? I take this information in and I have to act on it in some way. Don't I have to do something with it? And it uses all of its power to answer that question for us. What's going on and what do I do about it? Do I do something? Do I do nothing? Do I do repetitive things? I'm trying to serve you, body. That's what the brain is saying. I'm using all my mechanisms to do that. I'm using the skin, I'm using the sensory system, I'm using the peripheral nervous system, that part that's outside of the central nervous system. Central nervous system is the brain and the spinal column. Everything that radiates out from there is referred to as the peripheral nervous system. That peripheral nervous system is the way we feel our way through life. It's the way we connect with people. It's the way we connect with our loved ones. It's the way you connected with your son. It's the way all of us connect with the people that are important in our lives. Those hugs, we remember those. Those handshakes, we remember those things. That's coded. The brain says, oh, important information. I'll take that. I'm going to create a space for it up here. I'm going to create a space for your mom's fat right under here, fusiform gyrus, bottom part of the temporal lobe. I'm going to create a space for your mom's face, and I'm going to fire a number of cells every time you come across that face. And I won't let you forget it. The auditory cortex does the same thing. It says, oh, that's your voice. Okay, I got it. I'm going to code that. Visual cortex does very much that. All parts of the brain process these sensory experiences. Our image of someone, the sound of someone, the smell of that person, how we feel in that person's presence. These are all part of the ways that we attach to people. I wish it were as simple as to say those are all positive attachments. Sometimes they're not. Sometimes we have mixed attachments. How two things or three things or five things that are dichotomous and opposite one another can exist in the same place. How can a love-hate relationship exist in the same place? And can my brain make space for that and room for that? The answer is yes. It's infinite. It's got 85 billion cells, for clarity's sake. It can make room for a whole bunch of stuff. Each one of those cells can cooperate with other cells to create circuits that respond in these particular ways. Okay. When we form attachments, the brain's architecture accommodates that attachment. When we have a loss, or when there's a threat to us, as the ultimate loss being death, when we have a threat, there's a form of loss, the brain changes, it responds differently. It has already coded for all of these constant things in our life, which we predict are constant, and it says to us, don't lose this, don't let this change, hold on to this. It cuts pathways for us, and remember that. And so we hold these things in our lives. When those things are taken away from us, it's almost like a drug of a sort being taken away from an addict. We still have the want, we still have the need, but we don't have the substance to fill it. So we feel this emptiness, this loss, this fear, this almost sense of panic. And so what happens in the brain, particular parts of the brain, is that when we experience a sense of loss, we feel it at the sensory level. We miss that auditory, we miss that voice, we miss that sound, we miss those plans of things that we intended to do with that person. We miss the hug. My sister-in-law slept with my brother's shirts. Now, to the average person, that'd be pretty nuts. To her, it made a ton of sense. Those pheromones that were embedded in that shirt reminded her of him. That was the way she could be close to him again. It's the way she could stay connected. It was a brain telling her to do that. Who's going to disobey their brain? It's going to tell you to do stuff. When it is threatened, when we get into a state of stress or shock, and that disconnection is created, our dopamine level, our serotonin level, our oxytocin level all go, take big dives. They don't know what to do. They don't have a connection standard anymore. What takes their place is a hormone, and then cortisol. Cortisol is kicked in the stress circumstances, situations. It activates us. It also signals another neurotransmitter called norepinephrine, and it makes things active in our lives. We need cortisol. That's what gets us up in the morning. It's what moves us around. And it dovetails with dopamine to kind of say, hey, get up, get out of bed, move around a little bit, do something that motivates us. But when dopamine's not there and serotonin's not there and the oxytocin is taking a vacation also, because stress activates the brain in these particular ways and puts us on guard, we're literally into a fight or flight mode. You've heard of those kind of things, fight or flight mode, which is a strong activation setting. And the brain says, the autonomic nervous system part of the brain says, do one of two things. Fight this, that is, become aggressive with it, protect yourself, so forth, and get away from it. When we think about death and dying, and we're upset about that, we're anxious about that, we do one of two things. I ain't gonna die, we fight. I ain't gonna think about it, we flight. Step back from it. Those are the decisions we make. Now, I'm not saying it's absolutely instigated by the brain or fully driven by the brain, but boy, it sure is a major player in some of the ways that we have these experiences. So when these other dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and so forth reduce, the cortisol kicks in. Cortisol is the thing that will make us edgy, which makes us unable to sleep, which makes us tense, on edge, disoriented. When it's excreted in the body without being relented. In other words, at least in the initial stages after significant loss, whether that again is death or a change in career, or loss of a job, loss of a partner, or name it. And the cortisol is flowing and it's almost unrestricted. Strange things start to happen to the brain. So the brain responds to that cortisol surge and it tries to reform itself around that. Now, it's a different kind of response we see in kids. They have the same chemical reaction, but that brain of little kids, particularly prefrontal cortex, that thinking part of the brain, the one that allows us to have some kind of a logical, reasonable explanation to the experiences we're having. First of all, in high grief situations, it's kind of put to the side. We don't think things through very clearly. We have trouble remembering. Concentration's hard. Working memory's difficult for us, and so forth. It's because the neurochemicals we need to supply activity or stimulation to the prefrontal cortex have kind of stepped back a little bit, and we're getting only one kind of stimulation, and that's with the cortisol, which is fight or flight oriented. So we're kind of in arousal mode the entire time. And sooner or later, you can only stand so much arousal. We wear out, we get very tired. So you'll see people in grief states that are so tired that they can't sleep, or they sleep fitfully periods at a time where they make pretty bad decisions about stuff, or they're edgy. Those are all common experiences. It's hard to understand if we don't know what's happening to us. And so sometimes we'll think we're just losing it. And will this ever end? Our time perception changes. Sometimes between, you go in these highs and lows, a person's death occurs on a Tuesday. We go through this initial grief, the shock period in some cases. Kubler-Ross was very good at describing this so many years ago, decades ago. I suspect Kate might talk about that in her class on 5 stages of grief. The first one is shock, disbelief, I don't accept this. Yeah. And sometimes we go through that period. It's prolonged. But eventually we kind of come into settling with it. Maybe a few days later, the cortisol surge isn't quite as high, and we start to get a little bit of our functioning back until the day of the funeral, or the days of the funeral. We go back through that grief process again. And oftentimes people feel themselves on this roller coaster, literally an emotional roller coaster. And the emotional roller coaster in those cases is driven because the brain is going through a biochemical roller coaster. And we have to respond in kind. That's just the nature of the beast. I said that kids have a little bit different kind of response to this. I'm just talking, I made some notes about this. Kids are largely unable to weigh the effects of their behavior, the consequences of it. They don't logic things out. They need stable adults in their life to help them do those kind of things. In children, as in people who have high states of grief, it's usually the amygdala, which is a series of neurons or neural center located right in the middle of the brain. It's on both hemispheres. And it's regarded as the fear detection center, the threat detection center. It activates when the body starts to feel under some kind of seizure threat. I'm not going to drag this on much longer, I promise, but I just wanted to make these couple of points. The amygdala is what activates in these kind of circumstances. When the prefrontal cortex is reduced in its effectiveness, the amygdala kind of takes over. There's just got to be this, ideally, this relationship between the fear, urgency, look out center in the brain, the amygdala and the limbic system, and its connections to our thinking part of the brain, our logic part of the brain, our reflective part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex. There needs to be a healthy connection between those parts. People that live in a chronic state of threat or fear and so forth are largely experiencing a state where this prefrontal cortex functioning is reduced. And the fear center, the emotion center is activated. That's what's speaking. And so oftentimes we see this in children. We also see this in people with high levels of distress. In children, because the amygdala is activated so frequently, they may express their grief. First of all, they may not even express grief and say, I am sad. This really hurts me. They feel those kind of things, but most often it's expressed maybe as sudden anger. There may be a sad affect to them, or just kind of a down state. Anxiety, some kind of regressed behavior, thumb sucking may come back in some children when you haven't seen them for years. Clinginess, inability to separate, a lot of anxiety about being taken away from from sources of security for them, bedwetting, all of those kind of things in kids, and how do we deal with those with children. I know adults, many of them, who don't speak with their children about death, about dying. They don't know how. They don't have the language. How do I approach it? I'm uncomfortable with it myself. I'm going to tell somebody else about this. Yeah, I'm deathly fearful of it. I don't know how I'm going to communicate it to my kid, but my kid sees these things, so I have to explain it some way or another. I've also had experiences with parents who felt a tremendous sense of relief and catharsis when they could explain in real terms with their children what loss and grief and death really is without putting it in fairy tale terms and so forth. Children have a different concept of this. Let them have the concepts, learn from them. So I guess I wanted to say that I don't believe that neurological processes account for every bit of the grief experience that we have or completely control it, but it's just a way for us to understand, I think, what's happening internally when we're pretty sure we're losing it. And can't account for this. I'm not myself. I'm normally more glued together than this, but this experience with me has humbled me. It's brought me to my knees, and I don't know where to go from here. I don't know how to recover. The same brain that got you into this grief process will get you through the grief process also. And there is no time limit to it. There is no exact way you do it. You do it your own. There's books, there's literature, there's friends, there's all kinds of other opportunities. You can exercise. One of the hardest things for me to do when I'm depressed is to go exercise. It's the last thing I want to do. It's part of my depression. I don't want to get up and exercise. If a friend comes along and says, would you go walk with me, I'm probably more likely to do that. So maintaining social contacts and communications and interactions is also pretty vital to us as far as ways of recovery. One of the things I wanted to differentiate between, real briefly, between complex bereavement, simple bereavement, or complex grief and simple bereavement. About 7% of the population, the grieving population, experiences this thing called complex grief, where there's a number of layers added into what they're experiencing, where depression doesn't lift after a month, or 2 months, or 3 months, or even a year, or sometimes 2 years, or 3 years. It feels as fresh as 5 minutes ago, because those parts of the brain that code for that experience, those emotional parts of the brain, don't live in the future, don't live in the past, they live right now. That part of the brain that's still experiencing exactly what happened 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 5 years ago. That's not a bad thing. What we also know is, and I think Chris has been wide open and so vulnerable and so communicative and wonderful about sharing his experience, because this is how you do it. This is how you do it. You get up and move around, you do something, you search, you try to knock on different doors, you see if this is the one. You humble yourself in the face of life, and you learn from it. You staying stowed away, letting the pain, letting the sense of loss define my life, doesn't accomplish anything for me. It diminishes me. Can I share with you what my friend told me as he left yesterday afternoon? Maybe this puts a little bit of a cap on some of this stuff, maybe it doesn't. I haven't rambled all over the place too much. If we have questions, I think any of us are happy to answer with the perspective that we might have. A gentleman sat in a rocking chair in my office at about 5:45 last night, starting to, just after twilight, starting to get dark. Lights were soft in there, and I had a real soft spot for him because I know what he'd been through, the steps he was getting ready to take in an uncertain world. He didn't know exactly what things were going to do for him, how it was going to turn out for him. He sat up like this, and he tapped his knee a few times, and he said, I wrote it down. He said, a few weeks ago I watched the movie Kung Fu Panda. He said, here's what my takeaway was from it. Here's why I want to go with it. Yesterday is history. Tomorrow is a mystery. But today is a gift. That's why it's called the present.
So the first question, Kate, is directed towards you, since you teach a class on deaf and dying. And the question is, many people today delay the memorial service until the whole family can gather, and that may be for several months. And this is to make it more convenient with children's schedules and adult work schedules and when people can come and the weather and so on. And her question is, does delaying that memorial service until it's more convenient, does that delay closure? Does that affect one's ability to process the grief? And is that not a good thing, or does it matter at all when the service is, as long as there is one?
I should add, the answer to this is sponsored by the Provost's office and my very supportive department chair, my program chair, who approved my sabbatical this last semester. And the answer to this is because of recent interviewing of funeral directors is many funeral homes are now live streaming these services. And so I personally feel it's very important to get the family together, regardless of if you're close-knit or you see each other, every few years or whatever. I do feel it's important to have, if you can, an in-person group meeting or gathering. However, the closure that is afforded through live streaming, that we all know this, now everybody Zooms. You Zoom, you team, you do electronic methods of being together. And so many funeral homes now offer that as a service. And so if the family's not able to get together in a timely enough manner, oh my goodness, I would encourage them to avail themselves of live streaming service. And maybe that's not through, maybe you're doing some alternative service. Maybe this is not through a traditional funeral home service. Well, that's okay. And I'm pointing towards our media folks around. Most of us have devices. We can do videos. We can use our laptop cameras. There are all sorts of different methods to have that gathering experience, even if it's technological. That is so important.
But should it be within a short period of time after the death? That was her main question. Or does it matter whether it is a length of time after the death?
Okay, and I believe that relates to the circumstances of that particular family. That if somebody's having surgery, some child is having some important event, and maybe it works better to have that delay. For other families, they might need to have that closure. My own life experience was, I think, a bit peculiar. My folks were married for 62 years, and after my parents' 50th wedding anniversary, let me borrow your hand. Yeah, okay. After my parents' 50th wedding anniversary, they'd be out and about in town, and mother would say, "Oh, congratulate us! It's our wedding anniversary." And oh, how many years? "Oh, it's 54." And then mother would gently pat dad's hand. Okay, thank you for your service. Would gently pat my dad's hand and would say, "Well, we're still thinking if this will work out or not." And so my mother was cremated, and I actually had my mom my mother passed in May of 2018, I had my mother's cremated ashes in my home office, which, talking about, a parent's voice, I finally moved all my work to the dining room table, because in my home office, I could hear my mother's voice behind me saying, "You're not doing that right." And so anyway, but my parents did everything together, so I kept mother's ashes, so when Pop passed away, I had them interred at the same time. And actually, I also had my dad's ashes as a show and tell to the death and dying class, which showed up as a comment to in my course evaluations. This young person said, well, I was doing really fine in the class until she brought her dad's ashes, and she kept using the joke, this is the only guest speaker where I'm not going to offer them like coffee or lunch or anything. I think Dr. Kate needed a few more days off. And so, anyway, so we waited, and then my sister had a gathering at her house where we had the family, and so my answer is, I believe this depends on the family circumstance, but I believe that these closure services, informally or formally, are very important.
This friend has a family member who recently lost someone to suicide. My friend did not know this person well, but the family member is grieving right now because this person committed suicide. And my friend said, would you ask your panel? I don't know what to say to this family member. Do you have any suggestions, Lynn Ann? And I said, well, I would just say, I am so sorry for your loss. And she said, I've said that. Now what do I say? I said, I don't know. And she said, I need to know what to say, and I need to know what not to say to someone who has lost a loved one to suicide.
I don't say she finally understood me, but when I was going through my loss, she thought I was a little bit whacked out in the brain, which I was. But when my dad died, she would call me and say, I need to talk to the birdhouse guy. She didn't want her son to come over, she wanted the birdhouse guy to come over because she knew the birdhouse guy would come over and listen. Her son would come over and try to solve the problems, because that's what I do, is solve problems. So that's what I do, and I still do. I just go to my mom's and just sit in the chair and I just listen and let her talk. Because I think it goes back to what you're saying. Going to her class for me is my therapy, because I get to speak, and I get to listen to me speak, which helps solve a lot of my own day-to-day issues. And I think that's for anybody. I think that anybody who's struggling, you don't go to, I would never want to go solve that. The best therapist in my eyes is a therapist that just listens and does not walk away and try to solve somebody's problems. Because the only person that can solve your problems is you. Because the best friends I ever had after Blake died were the friends that just hung out with me and just let me talk.
I think if your friend's looking for words and a way to break open that opportunity, you can say, I don't know what to tell you right now. I don't know how to make you feel better. However, I am here. I will stay here. Tell me what you need to hear. Tell me what you need to say. I'm with you. I'll step back if you need me to. If you don't know what you need, I'm going to hang around until you become a little more sure. But just basically affirm, I'm with you.
Show up. Just show up.
Lynn, using the person's name, one of the things that people are afraid about is that people will forget this person, their personhood. Use the individual's name. Personally, I love speaking with some of my parents' friends, hearing them use my parents' first names, and they knew these people. But people want, in fact, Chris, one of the things that Chris says about Larissa is his wife, is that she stood out. Boy, she got his attention was, she said what?
Tell me about Blake.
Say it again.
It was odd because my third wife was actually hitting on me, and I've never been good at picking up on being hit on. And I wasn't really, I liked her, but the night we sat on a tailgate out in the middle of the country, in the middle of the night, she sat up and she said, "Tell me about Blake." I wanted to marry that woman that night because she was the first person that wanted me to talk about Blake. That's all I want to do is talk about Blake. I want to say his name. That's what I want, right? Am I going to cry? Yeah, I want to cry. Have I been in Dillon's after Blake died and I saw people that knew me and they turned to go the other direction? Yeah, I did. Have I seen people in Dillon's that have lost people and turned to go in the other direction because I'm afraid? Yes, I have. Right? But the reality is when Blake died, I just wanted to talk about Blake. Am I going to cry when you bring up Blake? Yeah, I'm going to cry. When the detective told me 6 months ago that he was there to tell Blake the night he died, did I cry? Yeah. But he told me he was there the night Blake died and he was with Blake. Did that hurt to hear? Yeah, it hurt to hear. But I wanted to know that. Did it take me back? Yes, it did. But it's all those parts and pieces that bring it all together.
The people move far away. And when my second husband died, he had adopted my son, and then he had 2 children previously. And the 2 children out of state said, "Can you wait till this time to have the service and we'll be there?" And so we put it off, and then they didn't show, which was really devastating. But what I was wondering about is, I really struggle when there's not a service. We had somebody from our CRO die, and the relatives came up, cleaned out her house, gave me her car, gave me something else, and said, "Do whatever you want. That's all we're going to do." And so we had to have a service, and I ended up becoming like a minister at that moment to have it, because the people, the service is for the people that are there, it's to how to deal with it. And I really struggle sometimes when there's not services, for especially, the people that I'm close to, I've lost several of my best friends in the last few years, and the last one was just in December, and they weren't going to have a service, and I'm like, I'm 900 miles away, but what do you mean you're not going to have a service, And so I talked to the cousins about Deb and her life, what she had gone through, and so they ended up having a little service.
Brain understand that things are not exactly linear, but we can still pick the sticks up a few at a time, but a few more. It gives us a pathway.
And it gives us memories.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of times there's memories that get shared during that time.
He was 16.
How old were you?
I would have been 42.
Had you ever suffered any other significant loss in your life before that?
I mean, I've lost aunts and uncles, but nobody as close as Blake. I mean, nobody that close. No.
Thank you. I just wanted to know. I apologize for my ignorance of
No.
your situation like that. Thank you.
The last couple of years, basically, we hear this on the news, national, but I'll just medical, law enforcement, and the other big one is racial. So if somebody that's live, I'm thinking of a friend of mine, I saw him just about a week ago, he blames the doctors for killing his son, or medical. he said they gave him the wrong procedure, but I know more of the story because his brother and sister and others have kind of put things together. There's a lot of rumors, but if somebody wants revenge or has that feeling that they did wrong to the person that's now dead, somebody else for the death is.
Well, I think there certainly are times when it's appropriate to blame someone else for a situation that ends up in loss of life or diminished quality of life. I think we all have to be very cognizant of the fact that anger is one of the steps of grief. And so I shared this with people who know me know this. So I was married for 4 years of bad judgment on my part. And my best friend died in Missouri. This person I had been friends with for about 15 years died. And my husband left me. He'd already filed for divorce. When I was out of state at my best friend's funeral, I didn't know this until I got back and half the living room furniture was gone. And so I think I sat in my recliner and I think I shook for 2 days. And I was just, shock and anger and everything hit kind of all at the same time. And then as I tell people, anger can be very cathartic and the fact that it can be very motivating. So I needed to paint my 1948 Fixer Upper, and that summer I did. Except for the upper eaves that I would have had to pay my medical deductible to paint. And so I put 2 coats of paint on that house, and 3 and 4 in places where I forgot and just went over anyway. And that was great. I was productive and I worked out a lot of anger. And along with that, and divorce, the death of dreams, the death of expectations, all of that. And folks, in situations like that, I also think pettiness can be an awfully good resolution factor. So every single time I get a new pickup, which hasn't happened for about 6 years, I make sure my ex-husband sees it. And that makes me feel awfully good. And so anger can be cathartic. It can be positive in the case of decluttering situations, or productive. Painting is a good one. As long as we don't harm other people, as long as we don't do self-harm, and to make sure that it's appropriate. And frankly, in situations where it's not, we need to be talking to professionals.
Okay, that last part, what these people, a couple of them, lawsuits, and they think they have, and a few of them have lawyers.
If it's appropriate, and there are drunk driving situations that cause death or diminished quality of life. My parents were hit by a drunk driver. I think they would be living today if they had not been hit in March of '93 by a drunk driver. And they absolutely had a lawsuit. They went through 5 different hospitals between the 2 of them, and 3 different surgeries, and a titanium plate in the neck and 1 in the leg. And sometimes that's appropriate too. It depends on the situation.
Okay, I'm going to skip the second question, but just for awareness, it's at an art gallery walk. I've met he's a Iraq war, he's 3.5-year combat veteran, and just so happened this captain, they were on the same base together, and what the captain said is to train military people basically to kill people. I was in the military too, during Vietnam. What the captain said is they don't do enough to prevent people from hurting, or we know about post-traumatic stress syndrome, and a lot of them are the ones I know that have been in a trauma situation. They're either on medication or they're suicide. So the point was, is if they could let me know, how can the government, you don't need to answer this question, but somebody needs to get with, and I know there's programs out there, but my friend, I saw him right before Christmas, and he was in a group, and his facilitators, they had more than one, and he told me his side of the story, but basically after he had, we can call it a meltdown, they got, when he came out of it, almost every one of the facilitators were in the room watching, and they said this was the worst we've ever seen. And that's, I think he got out around 2012. And he's on medication, he knows what to do, this guy's very sharp with the triggers. And so, these people around, in fact, when I'm heading to first aid, he said he would have shot me if I would have said something.
Thank you, Ed. Thanks for your comment.
Okay, the actor Jonah Hill interviewed his therapist. Yeah, his very unconventional, weird therapist. And so I think my question is for you mostly as a therapist. This is a quote from the movie that really stuck with me. It says, in traditional therapy, you're paying this person and you save all of your problems for them and they just listen. And your friends who are idiots give you advice, unsolicited, and you want your friends to just listen and you want your therapist to give you advice. So that stuck with me because as somebody who has gone through loss and has sought out therapy to sort of, cope with that and never found any solace in therapy and still struggles to, get anything out of therapy, what would your advice be for somebody to maybe have some sort of breakthrough as far as therapy?
So I guess the gist of your question is what I'm hearing is how do you get somebody motivated to come in and talk about something if they're not open to that? Is that?
Yeah.
Again, hypothetically, I would probably approach it from the standpoint of asking the person just to describe the quality of life they're having right now. What is good, what's going on that's good for them, what would they like to do that would enhance life even more? What makes them happy, what are the holdups to that? In other words, are there other steps you could be taking to feel more fulfilled in life? That, I know that sounds awfully global, but that's, I don't know if I'd use those exact words with it, but that's kind of where you have things right now. Is there something in there? Nobody lives the ideal life, nobody feels wonderful 100% of the time. Every one of us has a particular issue. Is there something that we can work within you? There's something that you're willing to engage with. I guess I feel pretty inadequate to answer without having a lot more information.
Right. No,
Just one more
that
round.
makes sense, yeah.
You know the best therapist I've ever been to? The absolute best therapist I've ever had is my riding lawnmower, my wallpaper stripper, my framing gun. I drive down a dirt road with the radio on, with a cup of coffee, sketch pad, walking through an old house, interaction with my hands. Best therapy I've ever had. It's why I drove 33,000 miles.
Some people are afraid to take a look at themselves. You did that. You did it incredibly. You have a magnificent story to go with it. It's a model, I think, that should do that. Some people have a real hard time taking a look at themselves and putting themselves in a vulnerable position with another to say, help me look at myself. Some people aren't even aware they need to do that. Sometimes the pain, I hate to say this, maybe the pain sometimes isn't quite motivation. Maybe there's some other steps that they need to take to get to that point. Other people just gravitate to it naturally and get a sense of it. They go back and say, I got to dig into this myself. Nobody can help me or make me do this. It's got to be me, and I'm going to just start looking for ways that he does it. And he goes after it. Therapists help witness and help you get to that. That's why I said earlier, some people don't even know there's a door there. And how can I show them and put their head on the ground? It's a frustrating piece of it, not how many people their patients hang with them, listen to them. What are their strengths? What are they willing to do? Are they willing to think in the kind of terms that he does, which is, are you willing to take some of this in your own hands and make something out of it, even though you're not sure what it's going to look like on this trip? Right, you have
Who in this room has ever heard anybody say, if you ask them, what are you doing this weekend? And it's always got to be something glorious. You have a 7-day vacation. What are you doing? Oh, I'm going to the mountains. Have you ever heard anybody say, I'm going to go spend 7 days in Greece?
Grieve in this fashion, that fashion, and so forth. And that's exactly wrong. You grieve in your own time, in your own way, and you do it with things that don't even look necessarily exactly like grief. It's a self-discovery process. Grief is one of those ways. And we avoid it, and I think in the Western culture, maybe other parts of the world too, we're so focused on productivity, we don't allow ourselves. You get a week off, that's it. At the end of that week, you better go back, and you make the best of it. You're not even close to humble yet. And you don't know if you ever will be, but by gosh, you're back out there producing. And we don't give ourselves
I think that's one of society's lies, that we're supposed to grieve in a certain fashion.
Well, it confuses us too. This young lady, I can't find him in my dreams. I'm supposed to find, there's this myth, I'm supposed to find him, that makes me a good widow. If I can just find him in my dreams and fix it. Maybe it ain't gonna be there, you gotta find out the door.
Okay, I just have one thing to say. It's not a question, it's just my own experience. When my husband Fred was dying, and they gave him like 24 hours, call the family, let them all meet and say their goodbyes. Because I think one question was, how do you say goodbye? Well, my husband had a really different sense of humor, and so did my brother. With each other, they joked a lot. So my brother came to me and said, I don't know exactly what I'm going to say to your husband, but I'll think of something. So my brother, Dennis, went up to my husband and said, you know what? I know you're going to go to heaven. And when you get there, you're going to see your daughter, your parents, your sisters, everybody you have lost. You'll give them hugs and everything. As soon as you're through with all that, there'll be a knock at the back door. That be me. Let me in. So you got to have a little bit of
Yes.
that. Thank you.
For the on-campus groups, for all of their help, and then of course our panelists, they far exceeded my expectations, and I hope that everybody got something out of it. I don't know how you couldn't, but that's me. So thank you guys so much for being here, because I really appreciate it.